Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Football Diary podcast. And we have got a confirmed FA Cup semi-final lineup, and there might well be some history on the horizon for one club, or maybe Man City will just win it again, who knows. But either way, loads to talk through as FA Cup quarter-final weekend came around with some fantastic ties and a couple of pretty dull ones as well, I think it's fair to say. There's a full house here as well. I've got Myles and Dave both with me to talk through this. As you know, Myles is an Aston Villa fan, so he'll have a vested interest in what the quarter-final held for his boys against Preston. But where should we start, guys? Let's start at City Bournemouth, I think, because we looked at this tie beforehand and thought maybe this is an upset on the cards. Bournemouth not in great form, but Man City not either, so it could have gone either way. And it was a close one, I think, for the first half until Man City made changes, Myles, and then it became a bit of a procession for City after that, didn't it?
It did, and I think, if anything, the thing that they'll take away from it more is there are green shoots for the future, right? Because if you have this season and it's terrible, and everything kind of falls apart, you lose loads of your experienced players, and you don't really know where you're going from there, well, that's a problem. But actually, in what looks like one of their worst seasons in a decade, right, they're probably still going to come out with a Champions League place, potentially now a domestic cup. And there's players that have come into the team in this second half of the season that look really positive. Like Mamouche gets a goal in this one. That looks like a really good, smart bit of business. He's looked fantastic. And O'Reilly, obviously, had a massive impact in the quarterfinal and has managed to do the same thing in the semis now. So I think Guardiola will take away from this that actually there's something to work with. And that sounds obvious for a team that's spent millions building this colossal kind of juggernaut across the league. But now they've got something to show for this season, really. Wembley appearance, probably a top 4 or 5 finish. That's all right, isn't it?
Well, 7th FA Cup semi-final in a row. So they've got plenty of pedigree in the FA Cup, and unlike Bournemouth, Dave, who will obviously see this as a huge missed opportunity and taking the lead as well. Evan Nielsen's opener was against the run of play, and I think it was obviously Haaland missed a penalty as well. No Kerkers, no Dean Howson as well for the Cherries, so it was always going to be a bit of an uphill struggle for them. Not in great form either in the league. So to be 1-0 up and going into half-time in that position, the hope was there, and I think it's the hope that will probably kill Bournemouth fans, won't it, seeing this game kind of flitter away from them.
Yeah, and I think it's been spoken about a little bit. They've been in advantageous positions in games and not quite been able to close it out. We saw obviously against Tottenham a couple of weeks ago when they were by far and away the better team. Just obviously, probably a little bit unlucky in that game as well. I don't know whether you can say, obviously, they definitely missed, Kerkez in this game. His influence on this side, particularly going forward, has been absolutely outstanding this season. And you could probably say there's a little bit of naivety about this team. It's still a very new team as well, Bournemouth. And some of these players are still, adapting to playing with each other and building relationships. We're seeing the potential that this team does have. I just don't think they're quite at that step yet to probably be in a position to be in a semi-final, in a final of a major cup competition. But certainly we've seen the potential is there.
Yeah, I think there's a danger of the season slipping away, I think, from the momentum they had. And it's so unlucky if that is the case. And I hope Bournemouth can still keep that European push alive, because them in full flow is really impressive. It's good to see. One note for Bournemouth, though, Myles, was Kepa, who obviously saved the Haaland penalty and would be thrilled with that. But should he have done better for one of the goals?
Yeah, the Mamouche one slips under him, doesn't it? And I think he'll be frustrated by that. But he's had an excellent time of it at Bournemouth so far. And I think there's been even recent talk this week of them trying to make that deal permanent, which you imagine Chelsea will allow to happen because they've got 1,000 goalkeepers already. And that's what will be important for Bournemouth. What would be really frustrating is if, they've missed out in the FA Cup semi-final. If they do continue to fall away in the league and not get something to show from this season, what will happen is some of their major assets from this season will still get pulled away because they've done enough to impress everyone. And then there's nothing to build on. Whereas if they can claim a European spot, there's something in it to say, Kerkez, can you give us another year and play European football guaranteed? Huijsen, can you give us another year and play this football? And Kepa might want to come in as well. If they kind of fall away to nothing, that can be really problematic. And it's a shame for them in this game. Like Dave mentioned, how those players missing might change their shape. And defensively, Kepa's used to having that specific unit, really, who have been excellent. And also, Kerkez offers so much going forward against Nunes playing right back for City. And he was able to get so far up the pitch because there was nothing pushing him back. Lewis Cook's not going to advance on one side. Tyler Adams came in and he looked a bit suspect. Solaire's not going to have the same attacking impetus as Kirkes does, and actually it allowed City to exploit the width that they could produce. And I do feel like if Bournemouth had those players available, it looks like a really different fixture all of a sudden. And also, if this game had happened 5 weeks ago, we're talking about a really different fixture then as well. It's just a shame those little things didn't come off for him, isn't it?
Yeah, massive shame. And it's a club that being in the semi-final of the FA Cup would have meant more. Not that it doesn't for City, but obviously 7 in a row kind of dilutes that a little bit, doesn't it, to a degree? But staying on you, Myles, before I go on to Dave about City's prospects this season, let's talk for a moment about O'Reilly, who came on, obviously, for Kusanov at half-time. He was struggling again. He's not had the best start to life at City, but O'Reilly looked a completely different proposition. He changed a lot, didn't he, on that side of the pitch for them?
Yeah, he looks really threatening in terms of wanting to advance forward with the ball as well. We've got quite a small sample size from him, really, and this competition's been something he's been able to shine in. And there's been a lot of players that kind of come in and out of the City Academy, and you never really know whether they're ever going to make an impact on this team. Because, yes, for every Phil Foden, there's a Morgan Rogers, there's a Jadon Sancho, there's a Cole Palmer that has to go elsewhere to progress. And I think a lot of us kind of assumed that the up-and-coming fullback at Man City was going to be Rico Lewis. And he is still an outstanding player, and he's made some good, he's had a good impact at City. But now it looks like they've got this other talent that's aspiring. And Guardiola was singing his praises a lot. And the way that he talks about him is kind of the way that he has often talked about the ones that he has bedded in. So I do wonder if actually he's someone he's got quite a close eye on. And yeah, he was great. He wanted to get forward. His passing range looks really good. His intelligence and his link-up play with the players around him. This was a really good test for him. It wasn't a lower league opposition who he's expected to be able to get forward and not have to defend against. Will pose a lot of challenges, but he still managed to control that position really well in that second half.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking like a bit of a more positive season end potentially, isn't it, Dave, for Manchester City? Obviously in one of their worst seasons in the last decade, yet they could still get Champions League football. They could still lift the trophy. I mean, I say most neutrals, we're not really neutrals, but most neutrals would probably not want City to win out of this final four, would they? But if they did, does this suddenly gloss over what's been a pretty poor season?
I'm not sure whether it gloss over it. I think they will, with the expectations they probably have of themselves, the goals they set, they'll see this as a disappointing season for them because, let's be honest, like them being in the top four has been a minimum sort of expectation for them over the last few years, over the last decade even. They've been a fixture there. And I think, yeah, if you look at the run that they've got coming up, I think probably their most difficult games, they've got Aston Villa, Bournemouth at home. They haven't really got many of the top teams to play left, actually, which is quite interesting. So they probably fancy their run. Obviously got Manchester Derby on Sunday, which will be obviously an interesting game. Obviously, have a lot of eyes on that. It'll be fascinating then because it's really tight. You look at Newcastle and Brighton are both level on points, aren't they, on 47, just 1 point behind Man City, and then obviously Chelsea are still in fourth place by a point. So it's going to be very tight, and it'd be great to see it go deep into the season and probably come down to the last couple of games that make it really fascinating to watch.
Yeah, interesting season ahead for City and also for Crystal Palace now, who had a terrible start to life in the Premier League this year after we tipped them for great things. But they are coming good. They beat Fulham away as well, 3-0, in a game that was literally a flip of the coin at the start where you turned from one spectacle to another. Fulham were on top, battering Palace, had like 70% possession, up until Eze broke the deadlock on like 34 minutes, I think it was. Had 26 shots overall, Fulham too, and lashed most of them either wide or over, so just completely wasteful. And another club that will probably look at this as a real missed opportunity to go far in this competition. But Crystal Palace, it's from strength to strength for them, isn't it, Myles? They looked impressive once they got a foothold in the game.
They're the informed team in England right now, aren't they, really? And typically, we've drawn them in the semi-final, but I'll come to that later. Yeah, they look brilliant. And I think the most important thing for them is they're building a squad now that is brilliant. Because for the longest time, they've been this team that we kind of associate with a talisman. And like Zaha was the guy for a while. And then it was kind of spread out a little bit between Zaha, Eze and Elise. But you kind of knew that was going to be what Palace built everything on. Elise's gone, Zaha's gone, and yes, Eze is still there, and he was instrumental in this game. Don't get me wrong, he was absolutely the standout player. But across the pitch now, Palace have got a lot of weapons. Like Mateta obviously came back in this game and he's always going to threaten. Ismail Assar is popping up with goals now in this sort of second half of the season. I mean, Lerma had that amazing strike at goal. They've got options across the pitch. And even at the back, they lost Chalobah in January and Richards has slotted in. So what looks good about this Palace team is it's not going to rely on certain areas. They are a real unit. And that's what Glaston was always going to try and build, wasn't it? And that's what got them through this game too. Their connection and their play together in the way they progress the ball forward, it looks really threatening. And their heads never drop. They've built up some real confidence with this recent excellent run of form. And they utilise that to book himself a Wembley place, which is only going to lift that confidence even more.
Yeah, Mateta coming back as well. Did you see his social media post after missing one game? Basically, this philosophical post about how he's returned. And if that's after one game, I dread to think how much he'd have announced it to come back after like 5 or 6. But
the earpiece was odd as well, wasn't it?
Very, yeah, it was.
I didn't know what to make of it.
Yeah, he's lucky to not have his ear come off completely, isn't he? Like it was a horror injury. But Palace in good form. But Eberechi Eze, Dave, what a week for him. Goal for England, obviously, last week. A stunner in an FA Cup quarter-final as well. And what a goal it was. He was instrumental in this game and is in pretty good form, isn't he? He's probably the reason why Palace are as consistent, going forward especially, as they are lately.
Definitely. I think, we know what a great player he is to watch, how entertaining he can be. He just lights up the stage whenever he's on form. I think that's one of the main things for me is showing his consistency. We know how talented he is, but I think it's showing it week in, week out. I think him having that partnership with Ismail Assar, I think in those areas and Mateta, I think that was the key, wasn't it? I think a lot of fans were thinking how they're going to replace sort of Elise's creativity and deciding all of a sudden, obviously worried a little bit, weren't we, at the beginning of the season? I think we were questioning sort of even obviously Glaston's his future. I think it was that bad at the start, but all of a sudden it's fallen into place. I think the basis of that team, it's got really strong foundations, and you look at that trio up top, they're as threatening as any team in the league, and obviously with Nketiah to come in and hopefully start to fulfil a bit of the promise that I think he's shown over the years.
Before we move on to conversation about what threat Palace posed for Villa, Myles, I'll carry on with you, David, just to continue on how Fulham did really and how much of a missed opportunity this was. Like I say, they dominated the opening sort of 30-40 minutes until the opening goal from Eze and were just really wasteful. And I mean, they still find themselves in the top 8, I think it is, in the Premier League. So a really great season, but they can be a bit indifferent, Fulham, can't they? They can really drop off when the going gets tough. And I think in this game, as soon as, especially the second went in for Sarr, just like 5 minutes later after the opening goal, heads dropped massively, didn't they? And the momentum, the wind was out of their sails completely. It's disappointing for Fulham, isn't it?
I think it is. I think with the season that they're having as well, we mentioned about the consistency that they've actually shown throughout the season. I've kind of gone under the radar a little bit and what a terrific job Marco Silva's done. So I think capitulating in the way that they did, particularly in the second half, I think will be quite a bit of pill to swallow for him. But yeah, he obviously made a couple of changes, brought obviously Andres Pereira in, didn't he? And obviously we've seen, it looks like he has a preference for Emil Smith-Rowe, and obviously given Pereira the opportunity in this game, it just didn't seem to quite click for them. They weren't as potent and threatening in that last attacking third as they normally are. And we've seen them be real clinical at times this season, but they just seem to lack that little bit of sharpness.
Yeah, but even so, let's just really shed some light on how big this is for Crystal Palace. Obviously, they've been to Wembley fairly recently in a semi-final, just 3 years ago, but they look a dangerous opponent for Villa, don't they, Myles? Before we talk about the Villa victory over Preston, which was kind of a bit of a comfortable formality in the end, how do you look at Crystal Palace as an opponent? Is this the worst opponent in the semi-final you could have had, do you think?
It's hard to say because there's 4 good teams left in it, and Palace have had such a good record against Villa lately that I don't know how to read this one, because, I mean, go by league position, it's the best draw Villa could have got. But I don't know if that's really a fair reflection on them, because they seem to have Villa's number. There's players in there that always have... Ismail Assar always scores against Villa. Mateta's got a great record against Villa as well. It's just typical. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous for it. But it's a semi-final of a cup competition, so you expect whoever the opposition is to be a good side. And Villa are a different side to the one that faced Palace last time. They've got new players in there that have made a real impact, and I think they'll pose Palace different kinds of challenges. What's interesting is last time Villa played them, they tried to kind of copy their system, and they moved to a back three to kind of go toe for toe with Palace, and it just did not work. And I wonder whether Emery will try that again, or whether he will kind of stick to his game, because Palace, they have so many ways to hurt you, like I said, and that's intimidating a little bit, to be honest. And the only thing that I think suits Villa is the fact that it's not immediate. There's still a few game weeks between there. You don't know where each side's form is going to be, but we'll have a focus on the Champions League, and we've got a really hard run of fixtures now. So it's fitted into them in a bit of an odd way.
Right, Aston Villa's moment in the semi-finals. It's the first time in a decade they've reached the stage. I'm sure you remember it well. It was the first time in a while, I think we've seen them progress in the cup beyond the third round, which we've mentioned before. But a semi-final it is, Myles. There's a lot to look forward to for Villa fans in this climax to the season. How does the FA Cup rate for you as a prospect?
It's got to be high, because I think once you get to this stage of any tournament, you've got to be taking it as seriously as possible. It's always hard to balance that amongst your squad when you're competing on multiple fronts. But I mean, you just look at Villa's lineup this week. Yes, they played Preston, a championship opponent, and you'd expect them to win. But they went strong with it, and the bench was incredibly stacked. And that fills me with a lot more confidence. We've got players coming back at the right time. That makes a real difference for us. And the January editions obviously have done something to it as well. So there's no reason we shouldn't be pushing as far as possible here and aiming for that place in the final. And then it's anyone's game. Then you're 90 minutes away from it at that point. But Palace will prove a really tough test, as we kind of discussed in part one. I just hope that we're up to it, because there's no reason we shouldn't be.
Yeah, an interesting game this against Preston, Dave. I think the quality or lack of quality from Preston kind of showed, didn't it? The last non-Premier League side left in the competition, which is a huge achievement for Preston. I'm not going to quiz you on them as a team, because we don't know much about them, do we? But we felt like this game was only ever going to go one way. But there was one man, I think, that really made sure that was the case, and that is Marcus Rashford, who looked like he had the confidence flowing through him. And I know it takes a goal sometimes for a forward to become confident again. But I think Rashford was playing through the centre for this game, wasn't he, in the absence of Watkins. And as soon as that first goal went in for him, you could just see that return. And the penalty as well, like the way he struck that, the confidence to not even look. And, that felt like old Rashford. That felt like vintage Rashford, didn't it, coming back to some kind of form.
Yeah, and it was almost the perfect timing, the perfect game for him to make a return to goal-scoring form. And I think that should do wonders for him. I think in the looking till the end of the season now, I think he'll be looking to kick on, and I don't think he'll be happy about, I think, his name being absent from the score sheet for so long. Was it been 11 games has been at Villa now? Was it 11, 12 games? I don't think he would have anticipated it to take that long for him to get on the score sheet. And you look at the way he's actually played over the last few weeks, he's been largely quite bright and sharp, a lot sharper than what we saw him at United earlier on in the season, and seems to be enjoying his football there. So, yeah, it's great to see him take the opportunity. It was a relatively straightforward chance for him. You'd be probably expecting him to score from there, but still you've got to put them away and then to step up and score the penalty. Yeah, is he going to carry Villa to their first cup? How many years, Myles?
Coming up 30 now. No, do you know what? Can I just say, I know what Dave means about, I'd be glad to get a goal after 11 games or however long it's been. I think we have to remember a couple of things. It's been a while since he was match fit, really. And when he first came in, there was like limited appearances, or it was coming off the bench and trying to have an impact. He's had an impact in those 11 games. I mean, he's had 4 assists in that time as well. And he's looked incredibly threatening. He's also keeping to that wide role. He's not really had the opportunity to drift into the middle very much. He's kept the kind of width that Villa bring. And Villa will often do that. They overload one wing and make sure that that one is where all of their width comes from. And I think it's that sort of thing that's gotten back into England contention. He's not relied on as the main source of goals at Aston Villa because Watkins is there, because Asensio's come in and stepped up. So, yes, it's amazing for him to get these 2 goals now. Of course it is. And playing down the middle and seeing that he's a viable option there is fantastic. But realistically, it's not the role he's going to play in the next Premier League game. He'll play off the left and he'll be a creative force. And that's what got him into the England team again. Because that's the sort of thing that you need when you're playing with a player like Harry Kane. You need someone that's going to provide a good service, and he can do that as well. I think it's really nice to see that actually he will accommodate whatever role Aston Villa need and do it confidently, because there's been times where he was relied on as a number 9 for Man United and it was clear he was uncomfortable in that position. Okay, I'm not going to get carried away about a performance against Preston when one of the goals is a penalty as well, but it's still nice to see that name on the score sheet and seeing that the additions we made in January are really helping our season thrive, because this season had a risk at one point of kind of falling away into kind of nothing and kind of trying on too many fronts. And all of a sudden we could have gone out the FA Cup, Champions League, we might have whimpered out and then not competing in the league to regain our place. Now, we're 4 or 5 points off it in the league. We've got a place at Wembley and we've got PSG in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And you have to say, Rashford is one of the big parts of that, really. He's helped bring this squad forward, and I think that's excellent.
I put it to Dave last time we were on the podcast. You weren't with us at the time, unfortunately, but that the England Rashford is very much similar to the Manchester United Rashford, in that the weight of the shirt and the environment of being in the England squad and the pressure that brought, he played all the minutes, didn't he, for the last couple of games for England, and pretty much, and was criticised heavily. And I think that's what he fears in the back of his mind. But with Villa, do you feel like that criticism isn't there, therefore he's been given the platform to just play his usual game, and that's more telling? He looks happier right in a Villa shirt, I think.
My biggest take from that is that you two are Man United fans and your Blue Sky accounts are filled with Man United fans who will of course go, oh yeah, well he's shown at England he's still that player that he was at Man United. I actually thought he did quite well for England. He wasn't necessarily an obvious goal threat always, but again, he fulfilled the role that you could see was asked of him, and that's what he's doing at Villa. I think the difference is we expect so much from Marcus Rashford because there was a few seasons where he was Man United's everything. And he had to be everything. He doesn't have to be that anymore. He can be a really good part of a really good team. And that's what Unai Emery will enable him to be. Yes, because he's one of the highest earners, you expect him to be one of the best performers. But ultimately, when you're accommodating that with other good forwards, when you've got players like Rodgers, Asensio, Watkins to play off and with, and Ramsey as well, well, yeah, he's not going to be the headline man every week, but he's going to be a part of something successful. And I think that's what Tuchel wants him to be as well, because all of a sudden he was a winger for England. He wasn't an inside forward. They even tried him on the right-hand side to get him providing. And okay, his delivery wasn't always as good as you want it to be, but you could definitely see why he was picked. I think he showed that he was a really good option. And I think it's encouraging that Tuchel took the chance on him. These big managers that we respect really well in the game still see something in him. Amorim obviously didn't, and that's fair enough. If it's not his player, fine. But this change in environment is clearly something that's going to work for him. And I hope that it motivates him to want to stay and do more at Villa, because I really think he can be a massive part of our future.
Yeah, I think even as United fans, we wouldn't argue that we just want to see a happy, productive Rashford. It's better for the national team as well, if that's the case. But I agree. I think with England, he just seemed to lack that decisive pass that he's showing more with Villa, especially with someone like Asensio in the middle, who's really benefited from Rashford on the wide left for Villa. It didn't feel like England quite had that for him as an outlet, so therefore he didn't know what to do as a plan B. So I think that's the confidence I'm talking about. But I just think about firing Rashford is great to see, and in this game, firing Villa to a semi-final of the FA Cup is massive, and I think he gets the headlines for positive reasons in this, and I think that's what's great to see for most football fans, surely. But moving on, we could talk Villa for a while, mate, couldn't we? Let's face it.
Can I add one thing before we go? Huge for Ramsey as well.
True, because yeah.
You think that he typically operates in that space off the left, and that looks Rashford's spot at the moment, but he's come back from injury and had an excellent impact. And you can see he's competing for the shirt. And actually, whenever he appears, he looks really dangerous. And that's one of the most encouraging things to me about this Villa team now. The way that they attack can come from various avenues. So if we face a team that puts a low block up against us, we've got players like Tielemans, like Asensio, that can unpick that lock and try and break low blocks down. Or we've got width from Luka Dean to get balls into the box when someone's sitting deep. So that's encouraging. Or if a team tries to come onto us, we've got Ramsey, Rodgers, Rashford, the three R's, who will run at you and try and take you on and push you back. And I'm really glad that actually in that one lineup, we've got a lot of different avenues to attack. That's not even mentioning Daniel Marlin and Leon Bailey, who will do the same thing off the right as well. So I'm really glad to see that Ramsey has benefited from having Rashford around as a competition and be someone that he can link up with in this game as well. So that's good.
Let's move on to Nottingham Forest, shall we? Obviously, a cup semi-final for them on top of an already potentially historic Premier League season. Whatever happens this season, it's going to be historic, isn't it? That's the only word you can use. But to be through to the semi-finals is all that matters for Forest fans, isn't it, Dave? Despite this game against Brighton being the dreariest by far of these quarterfinals, and the 4-3 win on penalties decided it in the end. And you could just tell Forest didn't have Chris Wood as an outlet and they really missed him, but defended brilliantly, didn't they, to take it to extra time and penalties. I think Brighton as well would have that 7-0 defeat ringing in their ears still, and that could have been playing on their minds. It didn't seem like it, but it was two teams essentially cancelling each other out for 120 minutes until somebody blinked, wasn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah, definitely. There obviously wasn't a lot in the game. If you look at the stats, I think it was fairly equal in terms of attempts on goal. I think possession-wise, I think Brighton just edged it. But yeah, it was a difficult affair to watch. I think you look at the two lineups. And you look at how Forest set up. Obviously, neither of Callum Hudson-Odoi or Elanga started, which is a bit of a rarity. Normally one or the other. Normally be probably Hudson-Odoi who will start. But they have approached games slightly differently in periods this season where they've looked to pack the midfield a little bit more. And I think they were probably conscious of Brighton probably getting the space in those areas in and around midfield and areas where Matoma and Minte can probably get at them. And to be fair, they nullified it pretty well and did really well defensively, as we've seen them do for the most of this season. And they've put themselves in a position now where they've got a fantastic opportunity at getting to a final of a obviously major cup competition, and if they can replicate that result against City that they had at the beginning of this month, I'm sure they'll be happy with a 1-0 win, any kind of win at all. To put themselves in that position and get into a final would be absolutely magnificent, and something that Forest fans couldn't have dreamt of at the beginning of the season. Yeah,
the result's all that matters, isn't it? They go into Wembley to face what will probably be the favourites in Manchester City, although I think that's still contentious. There's 4 very good teams left in the competition. But it was a dull game, wasn't it, Myles? But I think for me, defensively, they still look pretty resolute. And Matt Sells literally saved the day for Forest, didn't he? If it wasn't for him, there would be no penalty shootout to begin with. He once again proved why he's probably goalkeeper of the season by some way at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and the shootout, he brings confidence to Forest. 3 penalty shootouts in a row they've won now as well. And I think him being there off the back of this season. I've seen it at Villa. When you've got someone like Martinez in goal, you feel better about that shootout as a taker, I imagine, as well. So for Forest players, knew all they needed to do was get their job done because they knew their keeper was going to do his. And that changes the way that you look at an entire encounter like that could just be decided by the flip of a coin sometimes. And the game wasn't inspiring. And I think it's interesting from Forest's point of view that, like Dave says, a lot of key players missing. Their entire forward line wasn't playing, essentially. So we weren't expecting them to get 7 like they did previously. But they probably should have had it in normal time anyway. I thought they were the better of the two sides. There was a period at the end where Brighton were threatening more, but I thought Forest were the better side. And the penalty decision on Anderson, I'm not sure why it's overturned. Because, okay, it's not the biggest contact in the world, but there's contact there. And the ref gave it, there definitely wasn't enough to overturn it. It's like he kind of accidentally, fine. But he scoops Anderson's foot up with his elbow as he goes. He definitely brings the player down. Mm-hmm. So I'm very surprised that VAR intervened with that one. I don't know why that met the threshold for it, because there is contact.
Well, the question is, would it have been a foul anywhere else on the pitch? I think pretty much 100%
yeah.
Yeah, unlucky Forest to not win it in normal time. But again, Dave, it doesn't matter, does it? Forest are in an FA Cup semi-final. Can you imagine the atmosphere at Wembley for that game? The travelling Forest fans are going to be so up for that. I feel like the noise in that stadium will definitely be from the red and white end more than the sky blue end, don't you?
You'd imagine so, to be honest. We'll try and not slate the City too much because we'll speak a lot about their empty stadiums and whatnot. But it's...
Careful, boys.
Overwhelmingly, that their support is going to be absolutely tremendous. And can you imagine the occasion that all these fans are going to be looking forward to now? I bet they can't wait. And you don't know how many finals, let alone even finals, you're going to make it to in the next few years. I think a lot of clubs have been in this position with where they're just going to have to make the most of it. And you don't know how many players in that side are going have this opportunity again. That's just the reality of it. But yeah, I think it will be a great occasion. I think City are going to have an off day, in my opinion, like they did the other week. But we've seen them have plenty of off days throughout the season. It's not been a strange occurrence for that to happen. And I think Forest have got to step up and ensure what they've been doing well all season, which is defend resolutely and having that threat on the counter, which no doubt they will have.
I think there's something to be said as well. Oh, we talked about this before actually at an earlier point of the season, but worth readdressing with the cup competition coming in. Liverpool fans obviously happy because they've won the league, but is there a set of fans that are going to be happier than Forest and Villa fans right now? Like, if you said to a Forest fan 12 months ago, you're about to finish third in the Premier League, most likely, and you've got a trip to Wembley in the FA Cup, they would have laughed in your face, like, definitely. I think they all saw that there was growth there, and I think they knew that they had a squad that was better than they performed last season, but nowhere near these heights. And the same for Villa, obviously thinking about competing on 3 fronts. Like, you've got 2 fan bases of very historic clubs, big fan bases, and they feel at the heart of English football again. And obviously I'm biased towards it, you guys less so. The nostalgia effect of that, and like the way that we view football these days with like the takeover of oil states taking football to whole new levels in pretty horrible ways that we don't need to get into right now. There is something to be said of, isn't it nice seeing Forest and Villa doing so well? I'd like to say the same about Newcastle winning a cup, but they kind of fit into the other bracket that I mentioned. But there is, it is very like, ooh, this is a little throwback, isn't it? It's nice.
It feels new and different, and I think that might be, to be fair, the deciding factor in the game between Forest and City is the desire to win this one-off game might be greater from Forest than it is for City. And we've said they've been in this position 7 times in a row now. And I do feel like the last couple of seasons, they've slowly came down from that high of winning the treble and become, I don't know, less motivated. That old guard has done everything. What more can they do? And that must be a deciding factor. Then younger players will be hungry, but not necessarily as, I guess, experienced as seeing out games like this as the old guard were. So it's literally anybody's game. And I think for once, the FA Cup semis feel like literally a toss-up. It could be really tight. I'm really excited for it. But not more so than you, Myles. Absolutely thrilled to be in a semi-final and marching on in the Champions League and the Premier League as well. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you about your new hopes as a Villa fan, because every week we're on, I feel like I try and see whether you've changed your mind about what your hopes or expectations are. Has it changed at all after this? Has it got higher?
I don't know, because the run of fixtures we've got now is so difficult. Like, if you look at Villa's games now, so we play Brighton midweek, then Forest. So there's 2 teams right at the top that we're competing with. Then it's PSG. So it doesn't get easier there. We got a little break. We get to play our Southampton voucher in the middle of the PSG games. So send the under-21s to that. Don't worry about that. That'll be fine. And then PSG leg 2. Newcastle after that. Another Champions League rival. Semi-final against Palace. And we've just talked about how difficult they're going to be. Man City after that. Another European football rival. Fulham after that. Another rival. Bournemouth after that. Spurs United to end it. So for the last 2 games of the season, when are we getting points? Definitely. It's a very difficult run in, and you've got 2 cup competitions in the middle of it. So what are my expectations? Who knows? The good thing is the squad's getting deeper again. Anana came back, was on the bench this week, came on. That's great to see. I don't know. I don't like to talk too much. Realistically, no disrespect to Palace, because they've had our number recently, and I think I've given them enough credit. We should get to the final. With the squad we've got, and the manager we've got, we should get to an FA Cup final.
I love how quickly you flip between talking yourself out of success and then suddenly going, oh, actually, we could do this. I think it's the way it's going to be.
Yeah. And the final would always be difficult. Forest and City, they're both going to pose different challenges for us. And I don't want to talk like we're there already, because Palace could easily take us out of it. But I'd like, if honest, my expectation is I think we can get to the FA Cup final. I want us to give Paris a good game and just have it as an option at Villa Park still. I don't want it to be done before the Villa Park game. The league, I'm less optimistic about.
Right.
We could easily finish 8th or 9th in the league.
Yeah.
But it's the 2 cups have got to be everything for us right now.
Anything in the cup can happen, can't it? But that's it for this week's pod. We've got a nightmare week ahead for podcasters where there's so much football going on. I'm not even sure we can keep up with it. The midweek games and then the following week. It's going to be a busy one, isn't it? But we'll try and keep as much of it in the podcast as we can. So do stick around for that. I want to finish on, Dave, a quick word on Anthony. He's doing so well at Real Betis, isn't he? And there's a petition apparently for fans to try and crowdfund his kind of sale from United to Betis. Are you trying to crowdfund, do you think, his exit from Man United? How much is he still on your radar?
Yeah, I've kept an eye on him. I've seen they've won the last 8, I think, league games, is it? And
it's a different player.
Look like they're potentially on course for, competing for a Champions League spot, which is, fabulous, really. And I think it's only good for United, isn't it? For him to potentially even come back and compete again, maybe. I don't know where that's going to be the case. I think, everything, all the murmurs seem to side towards probably an exit. But it's good to see him playing well, and it's never nice to see, a player go away from a club, and particularly some of the criticism I think that he did actually have. It's great to see him enjoying his football, and he's doing really well. And if it's going to help us recoup a little bit of that money that we spent on him, we're not going to get anywhere near what we obviously offered for him. But yeah, it'd be good to get a little 30-40 million for him potentially.
When was the last time a player left Man United and their career didn't?
Jadon Sancho, arguably.
Not counting retirement.
I think Sancho.
It's still better.
Is he?
I don't know. It could have been worse.
Yeah, it could have been. But basically, I think United will receive 5 million if Chelsea don't take him, which is
very funny.
A weird transfer altogether. But yeah, we'll leave it there, guys. Thank you for listening. Please do follow us on TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, and also on YouTube and any audio channel. But until next week, guys, have a good one. I'll see you then.
Whoa, Mike.
What?
Are you forgetting something?
What's that?
Anniversary pod, no?
It is the anniversary. Oh, God. Listen, guys, I'm so sorry. How did I let that pass? It's been 4 years, almost to the day, since our very first sketchy Football Diary podcast, recorded live, if I remember correctly. My mic was absolutely horrendous. Yeah, we've come a long way, I think, in 4 years, it's fair to say. So thank you for helping with that growth. Any words of reflection, Dave?
Not at all.
Great.
No words of reflection. Just it's been a good ride, and
good ride.
Many more years to come. Let's go.
It's inappropriate.
Myles, hope you got something more profound.
Well, our clubs have basically swapped places.
Yeah, haven't they?
Which is brilliant. We were kind of battling relegation, and you were still pushing for top 4 and honours, and here we are now. Who would have thought it? Eh? I've had my fun. I hope it stays that way.
Yeah, it's been a ride. I think as a United fan, it's been a ride this last 4 years as well. But thank you for being part of it. And we'll definitely leave it there and speak to you soon, guys. Thank you.
See you later.
See you
later.